They're the dark achievements of our intellect. Nuclear, chemical, biological, and even dirty bombs. They're nightmare weapons designed to kill indiscriminately. And they may be in the hands of terrorists. From furnaces burning forgotten poisons to machines that probe, detect, and analyze. Technology is on the front line of defense. Now, weapons of mass destruction on Modern Marvels. We now return to weapons of mass destruction on Modern Marvels. Nestled in the majestic Rocky Mountains is the small town of Golden, Colorado. It was here on October 8th, 2006, that the alarm went off.
This is the primary center on Earth for monitoring earthquake activity anywhere in the world, and we do this 24/7.
Over 500 seismic stations around the world are connected to the National Earthquake Information Center in Colorado. When the Earth trembles, this is the epicenter for information.
The media and the world expects an answer from us, and they expect it very quickly.
Unknown to the analysts, North Korea had just detonated a nuclear weapon of mass destruction in an underground test.
There was a lot of pressure on our analysts, and because of that, the phones were just simply ringing off the hook. It was pretty clear by looking at the signals that it was an explosion and not an earthquake.
An earthquake creates two distinct shock waves.
Here we have an earthquake, and on this seismogram, we can see the primary wave, which is shown here, and later on, we see the secondary wave, which is shown here. Now, here's the actual North Korean explosion shown here, and what you see here is you see the primary wave. And later on, you don't see any real evidence of a secondary wave.
The Earthquake Center confirmed the blast hours before the North Korean government announced it had performed a nuclear bomb test. But a question remained. How big was the weapon?
So using information and seismograms like this, we're able to determine that the magnitude of the event was about a magnitude 4.2. This event was comparable in size to many of the explosions in the mining areas of the U.S. that we record all the time.
Another government agency, the Air Force Technical Application Center, calculated the North Korean blast to be 1/2 kiloton. By comparison, the Hiroshima blast in 1945 was between 13 and 15 kilotons. Many nuclear warheads built by the United States and Russia today are 1 megaton, 2,000 times larger than the North Korean bomb.
1/2 kiloton of yield is something like a large tractor-trailer truck completely filled with high explosive. Not a lot of yield. As a nuclear weapons designer myself, I would guess that somehow they screwed it up. Personally, it sounds like a failure to me.
Even if the North Korean test fizzled, the country has joined the nuclear club, increasing the global fear of weapons of mass destruction.
We certainly should be concerned about the specter or the likelihood of a terrorist organization like Al-Qaeda attempting to get or use weapons of mass destruction.
By definition, WMDs are designed to kill large numbers of people indiscriminately. They're usually categorized as nuclear, biological, or chemical. Some add hypothetical dirty bombs, which would be conventional explosives wrapped in radioactive material. And when terrorists are willing to die in an attack, even a jetliner can become a WMD.
We see new methods of delivery working where terrorists could transit nuclear or biological or chemical materials into the United States through a variety of channels that would be very difficult to detect.
The expression weapons of mass destruction was coined in 1937. It referred to the aerial bombardment of Guernica, Spain, by the German Luftwaffe. The conventional bombing was so heavy, it created a firestorm, virtually destroying the town. Today, a nuclear bomb is the most powerful WMD. Nations that are known to have nuclear weapons of mass destruction are the United States, members of the former Soviet Union, China, Great Britain, France, India, Pakistan, and North Korea. Additionally, Israel is strongly suspected to possess an arsenal of up to 200 nuclear weapons. And the United Nations has accused Iran of developing a nuclear bomb. Now, terrorists may not be far behind in acquiring the bomb.
Al-Qaeda definitely has an interest in acquiring and using weapons of mass destruction, in particular nuclear weapons. And in fact, particular religious figures close to Al-Qaeda have actually issued fatwas, religious statements that authorize the use of nuclear weapons against Americans.
So how did North Korea, virtually bankrupt and isolated from the rest of the world, manage to produce a nuclear weapon?
The general ideas of how a nuclear weapon works, how to build a nuclear weapon, are out in the open literature, on the internet, various places. The details of how to make a nuclear weapon work are not necessarily there. The biggest impediment to making a nuclear weapon is getting nuclear material.
After years of intensive work shrouded in secrecy, the United States was the first nation to successfully detonate an atomic bomb. At that time, the closely guarded secret upon which the experiment depended was uranium enrichment. The enrichment process separates heavier from lighter uranium atoms. The lighter atoms, called uranium-235, are more unstable. They're the atoms that are split in a nuclear explosion. During the Manhattan Project, the most significant method developed for separating uranium was gaseous diffusion. The United States built massive facilities to produce enriched uranium by this method. Inside these processing plants, uranium gas was filtered through a series of semi-permeable membranes. But gaseous diffusion isn't the only way to enrich uranium. There's another method that's cheaper, more efficient, and much more widely available. It employs a series of gas centrifuges and produces the same result for 1/20th of the energy costs. The North Koreans acquired centrifuge technology from Dr. Abdul Qadir Khan, a Pakistani scientist and the founder of Pakistan's nuclear program. In 2004, he confessed to giving away the secret and is now in prison. A centrifuge is a cylinder filled with uranium gas, spinning at 90,000 RPMs. This forces the heavier atoms to the outside of the cylinder. Only 7 uranium atoms in 1,000 are the lighter weight uranium-235, which remain on the inside. The heavier ones are separated out. 1,000 to 3,000 centrifuges operating constantly for 1 year might produce a pound of enriched uranium, enough to make 1 bomb.
You have to enrich, and then you enrich, and then you enrich, and you go through a stream of process of these over and over and over again to get to very high enrichment levels.
Once enriched, the unstable uranium atoms must be kept in separate subcritical masses to make a bomb. To activate the device, a conventional explosive is used as a trigger, rapidly smashing the 2 masses together. This creates a critical mass and causes a runaway fission chain reaction. As the atoms split, they convert matter into energy, and the explosion is born. The longer the reaction lasts, the bigger the blast.
There are many ways to make a nuclear weapon fail. There are very few ways to make a nuclear weapon work well.
A nuclear bomb may fail if the uranium is not enriched properly, the trigger device malfunctions, or the critical mass is not maintained for a sufficient period of time. Testing is paramount. Much of the technology behind underground testing was developed here, at the Nevada test site, just north of Las Vegas.
We're sitting here in the middle of the Nevada desert at Bilby Crater. This was an underground nuclear test conducted 2,400 feet below the surface.
As you can see, a huge crater was created, over 1,800 feet across and 80 feet deep. This crater today is just as it was in 1963.
The United States has detonated over 920 nuclear weapons underground at the Nevada testing site. To test a weapon, scientists drilled a shaft to a depth of more than 1,000 feet. They attached a diagnostic cable to the bomb as it was lowered down. Then they sealed the shaft. The explosion from the device caused the rock and sand above it to liquefy instantly, which created a crater. The blast data was sent back through the diagnostic cable milliseconds before it was destroyed. In 1992, in an effort to halt nuclear proliferation, President George Bush Sr. declared a moratorium on all underground nuclear testing. Since then, scientists at the Nevada test site have devised new testing technology to ensure the reliability of the U.S. nuclear arsenal, including some weapons over 45 years old.
Since the moratorium on nuclear testing in 1992, we can no longer go out and test a nuclear device, so we rely on computer models to simulate these nuclear detonations.
To test the older weapons, scientists dismantle a representative nuclear bomb and extract some plutonium. They place it on a target at the end of this enormous gun, called the Jasper.
5, 3, 2, 1. Normal like fire.
The Jasper is loaded from the breech.
This piston is inserted into the launch tube, and then we add a propellant charge and close off our breech. We then connect a detonator to the breech that will ignite the propellant inside and create explosive gases that will drive this piston down the pump tube.
The Jasper fires in two stages. First, as the piston is driven down the tube, it heats and compresses hydrogen gas to 10,000 pounds per square inch. In stage two, the pressurized gas drives a projectile down the launch tube at 8,000 miles an hour toward a plutonium target. The projectile's impact produces a shock wave through the target in a millionth of a second.
We can actually take an X-ray of the plutonium at a billionth of a second at the exact time interval where we want to see that shock wave traveling through it.
By measuring how the shock wave travels through the old bomb's plutonium and comparing it to new plutonium, scientists can determine the safety and reliability of the older weapons.
I sleep a lot better at night knowing that our existing stockpile is going to be safe, secure, and reliable.
With time and money, most nations, like North Korea, can produce a bomb. But for a terrorist organization, it's a different story. They're more likely to buy or steal one.
The concern after the Cold War was that there would be loose nukes, that the large number, tens of thousands of nuclear weapons that the Soviet Union possessed would somehow get into the wrong hands and be used in unexpected ways.
Although the nuclear stockpiles of the United States and the former Soviet Union have been reduced by 43,000 warheads since the end of the Cold War, more than 7,000 nuclear weapons still exist in Russia today. That country's stockpile isn't nearly as secure as the U.S. arsenal. A terrorist would need a softball-sized chunk of nuclear material to create a weapon with the power of the Hiroshima bomb of 1945.
They would have the capability of probably destroying everything within a 1.5-mile radius of the point of detonation. It might kill anywhere from 50 to 500,000 individuals.
Some tactical nuclear weapons are quite small and could be smuggled into a country. Each year, more than 10 million cargo containers enter the United States. Any one of them could contain a weapon of mass destruction. To meet this threat, the U.S. depends on new technology to safeguard its seaports. We now return to weapons of mass destruction on Modern Marvels. flight. But in fact, this worker is suiting up in 50 pounds of polyethylene plastic to protect him against the deadly effects of chemical weapons of mass destruction.
Right now in this suit, it's very hot. The temperature probably around 120 degrees. I don't know for sure. I am getting wore out. It's pretty heavy and it tears you down.
This is a two-man team performing maintenance work in an area that has been saturated with a toxic chemical agent.
If I was in here without this suit, I wouldn't be too healthy. The environment in here is so bad that it'd probably choke me, and the air in here would blister my skin.
The site is the Tooele Chemical Agent Disposal Facility, deep in the Utah desert. When it opened in 1996, Tooele was the largest stockpile in the U.S., storing over 13,000 tons of nerve and mustard agents, awaiting incineration. Enough to kill Earth's population more than 30 times over.
At this point, we have over 7,000 tons remaining and still the largest stockpile here.
In 1997, President Clinton signed a treaty along with the leaders of 174 other countries to completely eliminate existing chemical stockpiles.
Right now, the United States is significantly further ahead of the rest of the world with regard to getting rid of the sheer volume of weapons and agent that we have stored.
Officials consider Tooele an extremely secure site. But there are still over 100 million tons of chemical agents worldwide, at sites where security ranges from very protected to nearly non-existent. For many terrorist organizations, chemical weapons might be the ideal WMD. A skilled chemist can readily synthesize most chemical agents with fairly unsophisticated technology. After carrying out its attack on 9/11, Al-Qaeda announced it was attempting to acquire chemical weapons of mass destruction. Chemical warfare is ancient. Warriors have used poisoned arrows for thousands of years against their enemies. In 415 BC, the Athenians employed gas warfare by burning noxious sulfur and pitch during the Peloponnesian Wars against Sparta.
Using a bellows and a long tube, and they could project that up to the wall of a besieged city and literally drive the defenders away.
The Germans and the French used chlorine and mustard gas during the First World War. At first, soldiers tried using rags soaked with urine to cover their mouths. Later came gas masks. Nevertheless, 85,000 died. A horrified world sought to ban these new weapons. In 1925, 16 major powers signed the Geneva Protocol, stating they would never use poison gas in warfare again. Yet during World War II, the Nazis used chemical weapons to kill over 6 million Jews in extermination camps. Just over 40 years later, Saddam Hussein used poison gas against the Kurds of Iraq in 1988.
These attacks occurred on more than 40 different villages. Some conservative figures believe that the amount of those killed were about 5,000 men, women, and children.
The threat is ever present. But in the U.S., at places like Tooele, nerve and mustard agents are being destroyed.
How we do that is by taking them apart, draining the chemical agent, and sending all the different pieces to specially designed chemical furnaces.
In the past, many nations, including the U.S., carelessly disposed of chemical weapons by simply dumping them in bodies of water. Today, it's a different story. Here at the Tooele site, weapons are closely monitored and stored in 200 concrete and steel reinforced units called igloos. To prevent a deadly spill during transfer to the disposal area, the weapons are loaded onto an explosive and vapor-resistant airtight containment unit with a half-ton steel hatch. Once inside the disposal facility, Factory workers perform the entire dismantling process by remote control to keep from being exposed.
This is the control room, and this is where all operations are integrated and managed out of. There's a variety of screens here. Each one of those screens has a specific function.
This World War II container is filled with mustard agent in liquid form. The 3/4-inch steel wall container has been in storage for decades. By video camera, the operator guides the container to a machine that uses over 140,000 pounds of pressure to punch a series of holes in its side. After the agent is siphoned off, a maintenance worker cleans any chemical residue. The liquid agent and the container are sent to the furnace.
The heart of our technology is in the furnaces that we have here. The liquid incinerator, where the agent is actually destroyed, operates at 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. That destroys the chemical agent in a matter of seconds.
The extreme heat is needed to break down the chemical bonds of the agent, rendering it harmless.
Our facility is capable of destroying approximately 20,000 pounds or 10 tons of agent in a single day.
The goal of the Tooele plant is to destroy all its chemical weapons by 2012. The hope is that the rest of the world will also comply, which would eliminate one of the most deadly weapons of mass destruction. However, many worry about an attack by another extremely lethal weapon, and its use is dramatically on the rise: the suicide bomber. We now return to weapons of mass destruction on Modern Marvels. There's a new weapon of mass destruction. It's smart, adaptable, and deadly. It has killed thousands in the last decade. It's known as the suicide bomber.
A weapon of mass destruction is something which destroys indiscriminately, and there's nothing more indiscriminate than a suicide bomber.
This bomb factory may seem to be a terrorist supply house. But these weapons aren't meant to take lives, rather to save them.
We're the largest manufacturer of explosive devices in the country, except that ours don't work.
The Training Devices facility at Fort Gordon, Georgia, manufactures mock weapons for the U.S. military, police, and other organizations. Their top product? The suicide bomber's vest.
What we're doing is making simulated devices so that they will know what the real thing looks like and how to react to the real thing.
Suicide attacks are a tactic planned and organized by extremely committed military or paramilitary groups. Its history stretches back at least to the 11th century. A fanatical Persian cult known as the Order of the Assassins, fortified with hashish and visions of afterlife paradise, were ordered to kill enemy leaders. If they completed their mission, they could count on almost certain death at the hands of bodyguards. Until the present, perhaps the most notorious suicide bombers were the World War II Japanese kamikazes. Over 2,500 pilots sacrificed their lives. Today's suicide bombers frequently employ vehicles. Often, they simply wear the explosives. Since men and women throughout the Middle East now serve as suicide bombers, U.S. military personnel are at greater risk than ever. The Fort Gordon Training Center's replica of a suicide bomber vest prepares military personnel for this new kind of WMD.
Everything here is a training device. Everything is commercially available. There is no secret technology that's being shown in this. There is nothing here which would help anyone make their own bomb.
This is our training bomb vest. It is made up of plastic pipe that simulates explosives. It uses nail strips that simulate shrapnel. This has an alarm system that simulates a detonator. When this is triggered, it lets the people know that they are in a kill zone.
Fort Gordon uses the vest in its ongoing training sessions for troops being sent to Iraq.
What we have here is military soldiers dressed as Middle Eastern workers coming to a forward operating base to perform some form of task.
What the military training guards don't know is that one of the masquerading workers has a bomb vest under his robe.
What they're doing now is they have stopped the personnel, and they've only stopped the first person, and they've checked his ID, and he said everybody was good, and they allowed them into the forward operating base. What you're seeing now is you're seeing them come through the gate. Right now, you see the diversion, and you see all the people crowding around to see what's going on, to lend help. You see, this is the perfect time for the suicide bomber to detonate the bomb, killing as many people as possible. Anybody hearing the siren would be in the kill range. Halt! What you did wrong is you failed to search these Iraqis before they came in here, and you allowed an unsearched Iraqi in here, and one had a bomb on, as you can see here. Now what you see is them doing it correctly. They're halted, and one by one they're being searched. When you get to the bomber, the bomb is detected.
Troops are instructed to shoot to kill the bomber, as well as sacrifice their own bodies to protect others from the blast.
What you are doing is you're giving yourself up for the greater good of your battle buddies. The suicide bomber vest provides the realism that is needed to train soldiers so that they can actually see when they go to their first combat mission.
Suicide bombers will pose a continued threat. Unfortunately, so will other weapons of mass destruction. Nuclear, biological, chemical, and radiological. For decades, technology has been instrumental in creating these weapons. Now, hopefully, our technology may help to prevent the staggering loss of life that these weapons promise.